the more I get to know you. You are truly like an onion, and I mean that in all senses of the word. There are so many layers to you, and each one that you allow me the gift of experiencing as you pull back, it brings me tears of joy, because the powerhouse that you are is a product of the pain that you have experienced. Can you empower these people by sharing a little bit of that strength and what makes you who you are?
I wasn't expecting that intro, but absolutely. I think that for me, what's driven me to where I am is my family story. That's kind of where it starts. So I'm the granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors. I come from a very resilient family, and in the beginning, when I would speak to my grandparents and I would see them as victims of their environment and their circumstances and what they went through, I couldn't understand how they didn't see themselves as victims. And part of what I learned in watching them enjoy their lives in the later part of their lives was they chose to be resilient. They chose not to define themselves by what they endured and what they had been through and what they had suffered by, but they chose to take back their power and decide, I will design my life and I will live it in a resilient way and I will enjoy it, and I will not be defined by the pain that I endured and what had been done to me. So I always was very inspired by that. That was always a big part of what drove me. And when I was faced with my own challenges along my career, with becoming a mother and running a multi-million-dollar business and the challenges that comes along the way of trying to balance those two worlds, and there is no balance. It's a bullshit term. There's no balance in being a mom and working mom and an entrepreneur. It just doesn't exist. Just you're juggling, and
it's like Bigfoot.
You want to catch the glass balls. Let the plastic ones drop, catch the glass ones. And that has been a big part of what's driven me, is turning my pain into my strength and using it as my fuel to fire whatever it is I want to achieve.
I love that. And I think too often we lose that, right? We think that being strong is not having weakness or never admitting weakness. I know as an athlete, that's what I was taught. You never admit fear, you never admit weakness. And what flipped a switch in my life was realizing that I could actually make people stronger by admitting my humanity, right? Perfection is intimidating as hell, but humanity is this real journey that we get to live and we get to choose, right? You said it, you choose your heart. You said that to me earlier. You choose your heart, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to lose that. In your journey, Aimee, how have you chosen your heart and let that heart actually make you like this fashionista, inspiring mom of 3 that you are today?
It's a journey, right? So I'm always investing in self-growth, self-awareness, and evolving every step of the way. I've evolved literally every week. I take on a new challenge, and I'm constantly open-minded to learning something new, whether it's through, something bad that's happened or something that's been great. But a big part of it, I think, is establishing boundaries and being able to take the time to focus on what I care about and putting boundaries in place to protect that. So, for example, what are my 3 top priorities as a mother? What are my non-negotiables? What are the things I don't want to miss for my kids? Is it going to a school event? Is it going for a run with them on a Saturday morning? Whatever those non-negotiables are, I establish boundaries around them. I do the same thing in the workplace. What are my 3 non-negotiables as a leader, as a designer? What are my 3 non-negotiables for myself that I have to have in order to be mentally, physically, and spiritually strong? Because if I'm not strong, nobody around me is strong. And it's a constant struggle and it's a constant challenge, and I have to keep reminding myself of them. It's something that we easily fall apart and forget as we continue in this busy cycle rat race of life. It's time taking a step back and remembering what those three are, that's a big part of what I've become really religious with, is my boundaries. And having them unapologetically. Don't have to say sorry, it's okay to say no. In fact, it's great to say no.
I lovingly say no as a one-word sentence with a period at the end. Sometimes an exclamation point.
Well, Jen, I have one for you. So you are the first NFL female coach for the Arizona Cardinals, was your first team. I can't imagine that would have been easy in a very male-dominated industry to be the first female professional football coach. I know you've shared with me some crazy stories. I would love you to share with everyone some of the adversity you've overcome and how you did it.
I think the hardest part is, when you're a first, there's no North Star. I could never look at the NFL sidelines and say I want to be here one day. So for me, that journey was, falling in love with the sport that so many people, especially here in America, fall in love with, is football. I remember watching, looking out on the field and saying, those guys look like real life superheroes. And I want to be a superhero too. And it was the first place in the world that somebody told me, girls don't do that. Girls can't do that. So when I made my first football team, I made myself a what I thought was small, very big promise that day. And it was that I would step up to every challenge the game put in my way. Aimee, I had no idea what I was getting myself into with that. Because trailblazer, right? I always say trailblazer, it's this great thing, you're a trailblazer. And I literally picture the branches to the face, right? You're gonna go under this, over this, through this, around this, and not sure where that journey's gonna lead you. Because again, for women in football, I'll give you an example, right? We talk about equal pay for equal work, right? What is it, 87 cents on a dollar, I think a woman makes relative to a man? Okay, I would love to make 87 cents on every dollar that a guy makes in the NFL relative to a woman when it comes to playing the game. Because I still remember the first check I made for playing women's pro football. And I call it pro because we couldn't afford the professional. It was my 4th year in. We went 12-0 that season, and at the end of the season, I got a check for $12. It was literally $1 a game. And I remember when I got that check, and this was before photo deposit, so a check was a conscious choice. You can either cash it or you keep it. And I kept it as a reminder of what I was playing for. I was playing for every little girl who had been taught to accept scraps. I was playing for every little girl who was taught she should just be grateful for being allowed to step on the field so that she would be able to have a bigger world than I was. And I never imagined coaching was possible because it wasn't. In fact, I instinctively turned down my first coaching opportunity because girls didn't do that. Thankfully, Wendell Davis, who was a former Dallas Cowboy, wouldn't let me not take it. And in fact, he took the job on my behalf and said, you can't quit, otherwise the entire narrative surrounding women coaching in men's pro football will be, we had a girl once and she quit.
It's crazy. So, coming back to mindset, I think both of us have painful stories that we've turned into our power. And I think that's kind of what makes it interesting, because we've both gone through very different paths, but somehow we joined forces and felt so connected and inspired by each other because we both took our pain and turned it into our power. What are some of the ways that you've turned your pain into power?
Well, the funniest thing for me is, and I told you this earlier, my dad is a Vietnam veteran. He has 2 silver stars and a bronze star. And he literally looked at me on my journey and said, you know what, Jenny, I was a great warrior and a terrible soldier. And I can tell you, I am my dad's daughter, right? The things that I did were all the things that I wasn't supposed to do. I had the life that a lot of people thought was on the outside, it was perfect. I was engaged, it was right on time. I had, I think, 2 Super Bowl rings at that time, and I was ABD for my dissertation in sports psychology. And I realized that my life was not what it was supposed to be. The walls, the holes in the walls that my fiance at that time would punch, or the threats, all of that stuff, I finally just left. I realized, and it was a breaking point day. He looked at me with all of those things going on, and he said, it's a good thing you're pretty, because you don't have anything else going for you. And I looked at him and I smiled, and I said, oh, and you're not even pretty. Right, because that was the last thing I would have hung my worth on. And so I left, and I left everything. He had maxed out my credit cards, everything. I had not a dollar. And I packed my stuff. I meticulously packed the trunk of my Audi TT with my football gear, my professional gear, and my workout gear. And I lived out of my car for 4 months to get away. It's not that other people wouldn't have helped me at that time, but I couldn't see myself in that way. I thought everybody would see me as a fraud. How could I be one of the best football players in the world, ABD on my dissertation, and in an abusive relationship? But it was being willing to walk away from that taught me, one, that I didn't need any of that. It was all in me. And that I was made for strong stuff. And I think, that's a football lesson, right? It's not a question of if you're gonna get hit, it's when. The choice that you have is how you get back up and to do it with attitude.
To that note, generational trauma is a big part of what a lot of us have imposter syndrome because of that generational trauma, because we feel that we are not worthy for whatever reason that we've endured, whether it's a bully in school, whether it's a parental situation, whether we're a victim of our environment. A lot of us have gone through our own journeys of trauma in some respect that has shaped itself to have us doubt ourselves and the confidence within, and that is part what my brand, the Aimee Kestenberg brand, is very founded upon, is igniting the confidence within. And I believe that we are born confident. Our environments strip us of that for whatever which reason in which we go through, and then we spend the rest of our adult lives trying to get it back. A part of what you kind of spoke to was imposter syndrome and really believing that you belong here and that you are welcome here and that you deserve to be in a certain place. And understanding that the work that we need to do is all within ourselves in order to build ourselves up to be able to feel confident enough to be able to feel good in whatever that environment is that we want to be in, whatever that job is that we want to achieve, the position, the friends, whatever it is. Truly, truly doing the work internally to have those boundaries in place where we no longer tolerate certain behavior towards us, certain toxic environments that we're in. Really owning the narrative of ourselves, our lives, what we want to achieve, and who we allow in our environment. And that is a big thing that I've worked very hard on within myself. Every step of the way is stripping away the friends that may no longer deserve to be in my life for the reasons of what I want to achieve in the environment I want to create for myself, my family, my business. I want to be surrounded by people who inspire me and are big thinkers, and stop putting myself in environments, which I have, of anyone that doubts the dreams that I can see. Because if you can't see it, you can't get there. And if you have people around you that are constantly doubting that and constantly making you doubt yourself, it becomes very challenging to kind of keep working towards that North Star, whatever it might be.
And I think it's very important to get very real on how you do with that stuff. I'm a champion of using humor. I've been in some of I've been the #1 story in the country multiple times. Right? I have 2 gold medals in the first and second women's U.S. national team. I was the first woman to play running back in men's pro football. And the first person to coach in the NFL. And I'll tell you, when you're a disruptor, and that's what I call myself, I lovingly say my unofficial job title is disruptor in chief, AKA I'm the dick in the room, right? And when you are that person, you all of a sudden realize that no one is neutral, right?
Especially as a woman.
Right. I mean, I have been either the, the woman that football needed, or, the death of the patriarchy, right? Like, I have been that person that was so divisive. And my survival came out, like, with humor. I haven't told you this one. When I was playing on the men's team, social media is trouble, right? It is tough. And I try not to look, but you can't help but look, right? And there was one comment this guy wrote, and he said, she's gonna get hit and die and or get pregnant. And it was so shocking that I laughed out loud in my house by myself. And then I realized something. All of the radio interviews, everybody wanted that gotcha moment. So what if I instead owned the narrative? And so I would get on the phone and they'd be trying to find this moment, and I'd be like, okay guys, I have a great story for you. By the way, social media is tough. I read this one comment that said I was gonna get hit and die and or get pregnant, and I was like, whoa, I was one of the best linebackers in the world for a really long time, and I hit people really hard, but I did not know you could hit somebody so hard that you could cause immaculate conception and death. And the second, you can't go anywhere from immaculate conception and death. Like, it doesn't get any worse from that. And the fact that I could own the narrative and make it one that was powerful actually helped me alleviate the pain of realizing that people either loved me or hated me. Not me, Jen Welter, but the idea of me. And I think that's where we have to get. And I know it's not much different for being the face, brains, beauty, badass that you are behind a company.
Thank you. Jen?
Yes.
One of the things that we had spoken about was how both of us went through being very down in our environments early on in our career. Not only in our career, in a school setting. So something that both of us endured was very often being bullied by women in the workforce, growing our careers, in school, everything we've been through. We haven't had a lot of positive experiences with other women. Today, you see such a heavy push for women's empowerment, and it's almost become some sort of cliche where, oh, we live to empower women. For me, I used to seriously have a chip on my shoulder for women. I grew up only hanging out with guys. I was a super tomboy, and I didn't like women because I never had a good experience with a role model that was a woman outside of my mother, who I love very much. But I never had any other experience with women or friends where I wasn't bullied or put down or judged. And only later on in my career where I came across a couple of women that blew my mind, because all of a sudden I could see that they really cared and believed in me and could see the future of what I could be. And it was so authentic in that belief for me that all of a sudden it shifted the narrative that I had for myself, and it shifted the narrative that I had for women in my environment. I flipped a switch and then became the biggest advocate for women empowering other women, but not in a cliche way where, you see so many women we know, whether you're public facing or not, that speak about this, and then you and I know for a fact they do quite the opposite. Part of my story and what I live for today is to remind women who may not have the confidence within that they do have the ability to fend for themselves, spiritually, emotionally, physically, career-wise, that they can be anything they want, and to really truly build a community of women who truly act upon that. Don't just say that they empower women, but actually are each other's cheerleaders. But something I've learned along the way is that I needed to become my own biggest cheerleader, and not until I did that and truly worked so hard through therapy, both physical, mental, and surrounding myself with people that believed in me, that built me up, I truly learned to love myself so much, even in my flaws, that it didn't matter what anyone else said to me, said about me. And when you're in the public setting where you're constantly public facing and you're constantly being judged from the way you look to the way you speak to what you say to what you do, and we're all human, right? We're all gonna say the wrong thing once or twice. We're all gonna do something that somebody may not approve of. But ultimately, I love me. And that is the only person that needs to love me. And it truly took me 38 years to get there, but I'm now there. And even with all my crazy, and I know I have crazy, but I love the crazy too. And something that I really wish upon everyone is to really make that journey their priority. The journey within. The journey of loving yourself, figuring out if you are bothered by someone, why are you bothered by them? What is it that they've done that has bothered you? Because usually it's nothing to do with them, it's everything to do with you, and it's triggered a nerve of something you've gone through, and figuring out what, we talked about the onion earlier, peeling away the layers of the onion to truly come back to your core, to figure out what do I need to be the best version of myself, and be unapologetic in how you create that internal environment for yourself to be able to have that first and foremost before you go out into the world and do anything else. That is the #1 relationship that every single one of us need to build.
I know we're pushing up on time, and so I'm just gonna leave it this way. I've been called the face of change and the face of nightmares. The only way you can really face the world is that you like what you look at in the mirror, because that's going to be mirrored back at you, and who you let really impact you has to come from here. I've had people say, oh my gosh, thank you for being you, and I'm like, well, everybody else is taken. I'm really terrible about being anybody else, and every time I've felt lost along my journey, it's because I was putting someone else's definition of right and worthy and strong and powerful above my own. And I think when we get lost, we need to remind ourselves just how powerful we really are. And I go back to kids, right? The little kid that I am walked home into her house when my dad walked up to him the day I had learned about Joan of Arc. And I said, Daddy, it's a really good thing I was born now. And he said, well, why is that, honey? And I said, oh, they would have burned me at the stake. That little girl can change the world. And we, as adults, owe it to little kids that we give them permission to stay that little girl or little boy along the way.
Thank you, Jen. That was beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Let's give it up for Aimee.